What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you for tuning in. Exciting show today. We're going to talk restaurants. We're going to talk contactless dining a little bit with Raj Suri from Presto out in California. Raj, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right. So, Presto, give us very quickly the synopsis. What exactly is Presto? What's the work that your company is doing?
So Presto is all about making the consumer experience better when you go to a restaurant, and we really focus on ordering and paying experience. How can you make that more convenient, more personalized, more fun, and more profitable for the restaurant? We've been around for 12 years. I started the company when I dropped out of MIT in 2008, actually in the middle of the last recession.
Yeah.
And it took a job as a waiter to understand how the restaurant business works. We worked tables for about a year and a half. I built the first product inside a restaurant with real guests and real staff members. It was the Asgard Irish Pub in Boston, actually in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I learned that's how I learned about the industry. And we moved to Silicon Valley in 2010, and then built the company up from there. Working with a bunch of small customers, as well as we landed our first big whale with Applebee's in 2013, and then went from strength to strength. Since then, signed up Chili's, Denny's, Outback Steakhouse, Red Lobster, working with the majority of the top 20 restaurant chains today, and as well as a whole bunch of domestic and international small businesses. And our goal is to help restaurants deal with the multiple headwinds that they face. Headwinds in terms of guest expectations, how expectations are evolving in a world where technology is becoming more of a right versus a want to have, right? And yeah, and also with labor challenges, restaurants have never faced as dire as labor challenges as they've faced in the last couple of years. I mean, last year you had the problem of not being able to hire people, and this year you have totally different types of problems with labor. And then, the third thing is we're trying to help restaurants make better decisions. We understand the tech world, so we understand that, technology companies make really good decisions because they have access to great data and they know how to slice and dice it and analyze it in the right ways. When we look at restaurants, we realize they don't have access to the same tools to be able to make those type of decisions. And so we like to help restaurants, physical stores operate as well as e-commerce and virtual stores. And know who their guest is, and know what their guest likes, and know how often they come, and know, what the patterns of behavior are in these restaurants. So, in a nutshell, we're looking at moving this industry, to the 21st century, and that's what Presto is all about.
Yeah. So, Raj, I want to get into your backstory a little bit, but something you said that really fascinated me. You built this from within a restaurant, and there's sometimes a challenge with technology because most things are lost in adoption phase, right? And so the fact that a lot of technology companies are trying to implement something from a distance, you had a very different approach where you were coming from within, which I'm fascinated in, because I also talk about a lot and I joke about this, but I feel like we as a society should, it's almost like in some European countries and countries around the world, after you graduate high school, you're compelled to either do a year of military service, a year of civil service. I feel like everyone should do a year of restaurant service because you learn so much about the world as a whole, and we all interact with restaurants. Was that one of the most fundamental, important things, it sounds like it, for you to truly understand the human experience within the four walls of a restaurant?
Yeah, I think you expressed it really well. Restaurants are in some ways a microcosm of society, and they represent, they represent actually the pros and cons of the society you live in, right? You get a chance to go from the front of house, which is filled often with well-heeled clientele and people who are out there to have a good time, and then you go to the back of house and the environment is totally different, right? And there's a camaraderie in the back of house. There's a lot of chaos that you're dealing with, but people are pulling for each other, right, to succeed. And people speak different languages in the back of house than they do in the front of house. And the truth is, like, when you put on that server uniform, people look at you differently, and it shouldn't be that way in many ways. So, I had a situation when I dropped out of school. I took a job. I was serving tables, and my former classmates at MIT came to eat food, and I was serving their table. and they wouldn't make eye contact with me. They wouldn't. They would just like not want to even look at me. Like they didn't want to acknowledge that like I was serving them.
Like you were the
And
help all of a sudden, not their
exactly,
contemporary.
exactly, absolutely. And it was a very jarring experience. It's something
Yeah.
that I always thought about later. I was like, wow, I never want to be like that. Like treating someone differently because they're taking care of me. And I feel like there's a lot of that happens in restaurants. And the pandemic has shown that how some of these people we take for granted are actually more essential than ever. Um, and I hope that people treat some of the people who maybe look a little different and are wearing a uniform, but are not actually that different from us at the end of the day. So hopefully it can help us empathize a bit better.
Raj, you got me fired up. You could not be more right, because we're seeing from a cultural standpoint the pillar of the community that is the restaurant, and the economic standpoint, and reconciling those two things is a massive challenge right now, and we're seeing that play out. So I'm fascinated that. We'll get back to that. You talked about MIT, dropping out of school. That sounds like a very classic like tech startup kind of mode, where it's like, I went to school, it wasn't for me, I dropped out, I just started something in my garage or my basement, and look at me now. And so one of the early things that I read, Zimride, which turned into Lyft, was one of the companies that you were a part of. So talk about kind of being of the tech world, of the startup world, Silicon Valley, East Coast, West Coast. Give us a little bit of that dynamic, that backstory for you personally.
Yeah, I was very lucky to be part of Lyft. And I started that company actually in 2007, the year before I started Presto, and we started remotely with Logan and John, who are there today, the CEO and president. Um, and we were all in separate cities. I was in Toronto at the time, and Logan was in Santa Barbara. John was in New York. Um, and so, yeah, East Coast, West Coast differences. But the interesting thing to me about it, I actually caught up with Logan recently. We were reminiscing how like we started this great company without ever meeting in person. We became great friends, lifelong friends, and started this great company together without ever having, breaking bread together, right? And we just connected over the phone, and we got a chance to build a great connection, and we started working together. And it just kind of sort of shows that even in the pandemic, there's an opportunity to build connections, even though you can't be right in front of each other. So, I think that was one of the biggest learning experiences there. And Zimride went through a lot of challenges, many years of twists and turns until it finally figured out how to make it work with Lyft. And it just taught me the importance of persistence and sticking it out when things are going rough and maybe not going your way. And also having a long-term vision. I mean, the vision that we had with Zimride early in the day, we started in 2007. Lyft and Uber didn't really become popular until 2012.
Right.
So, this is 5 years of like being a pioneer in the space without being recognized and without being, seeing the fruits of your labor. How many people will work on something for 5 years without seeing any kind of benefit out of it, right? It's a long time you have to go without gratification. So,
I mean, Raj, not even benefit. Like people are like, "Are you crazy? Wait, you're
yeah,
going to tell my high school daughter that she's going to get in a car with a stranger and they're going to drive them home?" Like these notions now that are very mainstream and normalized for us were completely crazy. And so not only were you doing something that wasn't recognized, you were doing something that I'm sure you caught a lot of flack for as well. The persistence that you had in that, I want to connect this back to restaurants now, because I'm loving this. You then talked about the persistence that it takes, the perseverance, the pivot, all these things that we're talking about now very much feels like the resilience that restaurants have. So do you see your ability to kind of push through and then look at an industry that is pretty fragmented, very arcane in many ways, broken, yet also so inspired, and so many amazing people that put their heart and passion into it? Kind of reconcile that for us, as far as like the ability to take that resilient mentality and apply it to an industry that is so desperately in need of it, like the restaurants.
Yeah, I think it's a really good analogy. Restaurants today have never been through such a challenging time, and no one would have expected their revenues to go close to zero, right? Like in restaurants, if you go down 5%, you're really worried. So going down 50%, 90%,
Yeah.
you're like, the world has come to an end. But I think this will actually teach restaurant operators that that they can survive the worst. So when they come out of this, and when they find a way to thrive, which I believe many will do, they will look back on this time and say, look, if I can survive that, I can survive anything.
Yeah.
And that's where they're going to carry with them for their for a lifetime. And they'll never have to go through a worse situation than this ever. So this is a great sort of learning opportunity. The way I think about it is like it's a story to tell your grandkids later on, right?
Yeah.
And you lived through the great pandemic of 2020, and you came out the other side with a smile on your face, and a business that continued to grow. So ultimately, people need to eat food. Restaurants are a mainstay of society. They're not going to go away. Um, you know, People who manage to stay strong and pivot and be adaptable will gain share and come out of
Yeah.
this with their brands enhanced. Whereas the weak sort of will fall away, right? Like the people who are not as passionate as you, who are not as motivated as you to make it work, those people will fall away. And the way I always think about these types of situations is like running uphill, right? Running uphill is hard for everyone, but the
Yep.
people who don't give up are the ones who make it to the top of the hill, and that's the opportunity here for restaurant tours. Whereas before, it was a very crowded space. I mean, let's be honest, restaurants were a saturated market. There was too many
Yep.
of them, and now there's an opportunity to actually differentiate.
So opportunity for sure. We spent a lot of time reminiscing about our history within that and putting our past successes and the way we came up in this industry on a pedestal. Now we're recognizing that none of that exists anymore as the way we knew it. Now it's time for us to think about what happens next. And so that's very much what we're talking about a lot on the show these days is what do we do that happens next? A lot of the vulnerabilities of our industry have been massively exposed, and we're needing to figure out how to get beyond the things that we think are the status quo and supposed to be to what happens next. And so with that in mind, I want to talk very practically about what Presto is doing, what the interaction is, what the actual product and service that you are providing, and talk about the value that's going to bring. Because I want everybody watching and listening to understand that the way that you used to do things from a high touch hospitality and the amount of touches that you have with a guest and their guest experience, it's not going to be the same. It's just not. Full stop. It's not going to be the same. So let's talk about your model and the way that could be an opportunity to shift to a new model of the guest and customer experience.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think there's always been a mentality in the restaurant space. It's like, I'm here to serve. I'm here to get as close to the guests as possible, so I can make them feel great. And there's no such thing as too much or too close of a touch, right? And that mentality has to shift right on its head right now in the pandemic, where people just don't want to get too close to strangers, right? And people they don't really know. And also the fact that governments are now mandating things like masks indoors, right, which is only becoming more and more popular every day. There's a lot of resistance to masks, but ultimately everyone's going to have to wear a mask indoors until the pandemic's over. And most restaurants already have staff members with masks. And the interaction with a stranger wearing a mask, it just can never be as intimate as it was. It'd probably be 100 times less intimate than it was, before. And it's just hard to even understand what they're saying. If you can't read someone's lips and if they're muffled through a mask, it's hard to even communicate with people. So what restaurants need to understand is trying to do things the old way is just trying to shove a square peg into a round hole, right? You're trying to do things in a way that just is not going to work anymore. Your guests are not going to like it. Your staff are not going to like it. And practically, it's not going to work because of the physical constraints that you're under. So what that means is that you need to adopt a different mentality, and the mentality we think is the best in this time is give your guests what they want. They want to come in and have great food and enjoy the time with their family and friends who they're already in their social bubble with this group of people, right? Like they're not worried about interacting with their family and friends because they live with them already. So they just want to be in that bubble and come into the restaurant in that bubble and come out in that bubble without having to break that bubble in any way. And so our technology, the way is designed to help with that, because it's designed to help from the very beginning of the experience, where a guest can check into a restaurant without talking to a host. They can scan a QR code with their phone, and they can say, I'm here at the restaurant, put me in line, and when you're ready, send me a text, right? And so the restaurant sends them a text, and actually they can get started on their order and look at the menu while they're outside the restaurant. So even the restaurant's busy and they're in their parking lot, or they're waiting outside, they can get started on looking at the menu and placing their order, which saves them a bunch of time. And it doesn't keep them thinking about how hungry they are, because a lot of people, when they're waiting for a table, they're hungry. And then as they're being sat, when the table is ready, they can actually fire the order right then. So the food and drinks are gonna come to their table much faster than it would have before. Which helps the restaurant, because it shortens about 8 to 10 minutes of time at the front end of the experience. Which, if you're a restaurant operating at lower capacity, every table turn matters even more to you than before. And if you can turn your table turns from like an hour to 30 minutes, that's twice as many tables you can process, right? So
8 to 10 minutes in a restaurant is a lifetime. I mean, you're thinking about 30 seconds at a time in the kitchen. You're thinking about 4 to 5 minutes at a time at a clip in the front of house. So 8 to 10 minutes is a massive, that's dollars. Like, let's be practical. That is dollars that you're talking about, because time is money, absolutely, in a restaurant. And to your point, when you have slimmer capacity, every second is going to count. So I appreciate that. So we're saving them some time. We're getting the guests the experience they want as quickly as possible with minimal interaction, still finding a way. Now, how do you reconcile that with then still creating an ambiance? Because the high touch hospitality, our feeling has been in the industry, the more we interact, the more opportunity we're creating for a good experience. Now we're recognizing that we need to balance the interactions with the expectation of the guest. Are you aware of that? Has there been pushback? Is there conversations about the way that it still feels organic and natural and not disconnected from the actual experience of the restaurant?
Yeah. I think it's a great question. How can you deliver great hospitality and service, with all the constraints that restaurants are under? And I think restaurants need to reframe what hospitality means in this time. And I think hospitality means that whenever a guest needs something, they need you, you're there. But when a guest doesn't need you, you're far away, right? And so that is the distinction the restaurants need to make right now. Before, restaurants could kind of hedge their bets. They can be there when you don't need them. They can be a little bit intrusive, and it's okay, because you're providing hospitality. Maybe sometimes you're there when the guest needs you. Sometimes you're there not when the guest doesn't need you. But it doesn't matter. Now it matters. Now you need to only be there when the guest needs you, and not be anywhere near otherwise. And the way to actually find out when the guest needs you is maybe through there's hand signals, or maybe there's technology, like our technology allows the guest to call the server whenever they need help, so they can actually scan the QR code. They can ask what they need, and the server will be there right there. So it's to-go boss, cutlery, napkins, whatever. Or they can just raise their hand and say, I need some help. But if the server is constantly checking in, a lot of guests will not be comfortable with that. So I think it's important to find that balance between like providing hospitality and not getting I don't know, too much up in the guest grill, right? Whatever, you just don't want to get too close to the guest. A lot of them will not appreciate that at this time. And the other thing is, making the payment experience easy, right? Our technology allows for the guest to pay with a contactless experience. You can pay with their phone, scan the QR code, and just hit pay right there. You can pay with Apple Pay or Google Pay or PayPal or any of that. And actually, PayPal is a big partner of ours. They're helping, to drive contactless payments. And what that means is the guest doesn't need to exchange credit cards, exchange cash, or touch a pen that everybody else is touching to like sign their check. I find that is actually the most kind of revolting part of the experience today. I go out to a lot of restaurants, and touching a pen that everybody else is touching to sign something is just really, because everybody else has been touching that pen, and their hands are dirty after eating a meal. Like, that's just not fun, right? And doing it through your phone, which it's your personal device, I think it's the best way to do it.
So there is adoption, and I mentioned adoption is where a lot of things are lost on two sides of the equation. So I see there being a lot of need for just education, making it seamless on both sides of that coin. You have restaurants that need to be able to understand that technology, utilize that technology, and then you have guests who now are interacting in a different way in that experience as well. So let's get granular with exactly how can, right now, anybody watching who's on either side guest or restaurant, how can they find out more? Are there tutorials? Are there ways that they can kind of see the product in action? Kind of give us a little bit of the practical from both sides, guest and restaurant.
Yeah, great question. So for the restaurant, we're actually giving this technology away for free in the pandemic as a service to help restaurants reopen. You can go to our website, presto.com, and you can see a video of how it works. And it shows an animation of how it works for the guest and for the staff member. And you can sign up right there and get your kit delivered within days. So you can be operating in a contactless order and pay fashion within days at no cost out of pocket. So we've already had over 5,000 restaurants now sign up for that, and so we're glad to be helping restaurants across the world to operate in a safer way. And for the guest, you can do the same thing. You can go to the website presto.com. You can see videos on it, and we're soon going to be offering a map of restaurants, so you can go to a restaurant near you which offers this service.
Oh, that's great.
And the exciting thing for guests is that it's going to remember you every time you go to a restaurant, so you can just reorder your past orders. If you have a special dietary preference or an allergy, it'll filter the menu for you. And so that's going to be very valuable to a guest. We all go out to eat with family and friends who have different dietary preferences or allergies, and being able to filter the menu is going to be quite valuable to them. And the other thing is we're going to be helping restaurants with is helping with marketing. So helping restaurants market to the guests who come to their restaurants. There's no other way to actually identify your guests when they come to your restaurant, right? How many times do restaurants just look at their overall sales for the last week, but they don't know where those sales came from?
So true.
And websites don't have that problem. E-commerce sites don't have that problem. Amazon knows exactly who's coming to their website and what people are buying, and so they can tailor the offering to individuals. Restaurants can't do that until now. With our technology, they can, and they'll know who's coming to the restaurant and what they're buying. And if their sales were up last week, what does that mean? What cohort or segment of customers are coming to the restaurant? The sales were down. Which segment of customers abandoned them for the last week? And that will help target or tailor marketing efforts. Marketing is very expensive right now in the pandemic, where every dime matters. But knowing who your customer is allows you to market in a very cheap way with using emails versus going out and having to buy expensive marketing. And so we can help restaurants drive traffic in the pandemic, which for free, basically. I don't think restaurants will find a better deal than that anywhere else.
Which is huge for sure. So the restaurants then have access to their customer information?
Yes. They know which customers came to their website and what they bought and how often they came and so on.
That's huge. So then there's an API that actually connects with their website as well?
Yeah, restaurants can link their website to our website so that people coming to their website can actually use our system to order.
Understood. I love that. I'm a big fan. I talk a lot to restaurateurs about you got to own the resource. I talk about delivery apps, like a lot of them. It's hard because of the amount of fees that they charge, and then also you don't actually own that customer. And so I think that's an important distinction and functionality of what you're talking about. Last couple minutes, give us some last thoughts. This is great. I appreciate the work that you're doing. We're going to make sure everyone's linked up to everything. You can go check that out. We'll get it out to all our restaurant network because I think it's an important service and feature. And I think it is absolutely not just what's coming, it's what's happening right now. And if you are not making the transition to being in the 21st century, as you put it, but also being relevant today and understanding the expectations of your customer, you are going to get wiped off the map. It is just the fact of what's happening right now. So I want to make sure that everyone understands that. Any last thoughts before we let you go?
Yeah, look, I think this is great what you're doing, helping people understand the pandemic a bit better. I'm really impressed by the questions you've asked. So, very insightful questions. Look, it's a difficult time for everyone, and but I always look at crisis as a moment of opportunity, and I think with that mentality, and with the scrappiness that we all know that small business operators have, right? It's not easy to be a small business operator, and you're scrambling by at the best of days, and then I think this is going to show the resilience of our restaurant industry even more than ever. And I think we've all realized through this pandemic how important restaurants are to the culture of this country
That's
and
it.
to who we are as a people, right? Our eating and drinking places are fundamentally close to our hearts. It's not just large employer, which it is. It's a huge employer and a huge influencer politically, but it's also close to our hearts. And you saw all the efforts to go out and help restaurants when the
Yeah.
pandemic hit. People just formed this relationship with their local restaurants that goes beyond business. And for me, it's an honor to be serving this industry. It's an honor to be helping all the consumers who go out to enjoy this industry and partake in this ancient ritual of eating and drinking together. And I wish everyone the best.
Raj, I really appreciate the work that you're doing. Phenomenal, amazing, going to change the industry. Absolutely. It already has. I am most grateful for this conversation when you share. Tell me the name of the restaurant in Cambridge again, the pub.
The Asgard Irish Pub.
The Asgard Irish Pub. We're going to find them and connect with them as well because hell, I want to find somebody who remembers Raj when he was serving tables. I am so grateful for you sharing that with us because so often in this industry, right, we're told, when are you going to get a real job? And that puts us in a position of always having to defend the fact that this is an industry that is 660,000 restaurants, 15 million people, and the amount of other people that are involved and business involved in the whole ecosystem supply chain we're seeing is massive. So it is a real job. It is a real industry, and it matters culturally and economically. So I appreciate that you kind of shared that, like, look, you had to get in a restaurant, understand it, get those lack of eye contact and those sly looks and those, oh man, Raj, is not going to make it. And clearly you have. So thank you so much, Raj. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate those kind words. Very nice of you.
All right. Cheers. Have a great day. Awesome. That's exactly what we need. I want to make sure everyone understands that they are giving away their technology for free. And hey, look, they're smart. They're giving away for free because it is the right thing to do. They're also giving away for free because they got 5,000 restaurants to sign up. And at some point, they'll go back to a pay model. And from talking to Raj, I know they'll do that thoughtfully and in the right manner and in the right time, yet it really, really matters. Contactless dining is now. It was always coming. It's now. Right now, you need to move towards this. Your restaurant needs to move towards this. You as a consumer, as a diner, as a guest at restaurants, this is going to be the way that it is. It's going to be clumsy. It's going to be awkward at times. Yet what isn't right now? So I'm really grateful to Raj for the conversation. Thanks to Quinn Kelsey for setting this up. Quinn's now got multiple guests on. She connected us with Danos Tequila, and we had Conley and Angela from Dugan and Dame and Kapow on. Then Angela was on the show herself. Now her husband Vaughn is going to be on next week. It's good people connecting good people. When I say connect me to people and I'll have them on the show, I'm fucking serious, people. They will be on the show. We'll figure it out. Sophie and I, come on in here, Sophie. We're just talking before the show even. Hey, Quinn, there she is right there. Big fan over here. We're a big fan of you as well. We've been talking a lot about channels, developing these channels and getting more focused and granular and kind of into the trenches with specific topics that are of relevance and importance to our guests and to our audience. So this was a great way to kind of further the conversation, very specifically business-minded. Awesome conversation, right?
It was awesome. I was really excited just as a consumer that I don't know why it caught me, but saving your dietary preferences in the app is so cool. I recently went dairy free, and I used to go through menus and be like, I can't eat that. I can't eat that. I just feel sad now. But if it fixes your dietary preferences, like that's just amazing.
Yeah, I like it. I think it feels like it's adding more friction because it's different, yet it is reducing friction massively. So I think it's very important to recognize that. So I think it's a really great product. Even if the product itself and the service itself wasn't my favorite, I still think it's important for us to share it. I still think it's important for restaurants to sign up because this and other technologies like it are happening. They've happened. They're here. They have to be a part of the way that we interact. And the fact that they can touch the guest experience by low touch at every level makes a ton of sense to me. It also, the fact that now they're aggregating information and creating a better UX, a better experience for your guest, it makes a lot of sense to me. And you own your resource and can potentially push marketing out there, I think is massive, because rightfully so, we complain a lot about delivery apps because huge delivery fees. And the reality is they're a customer of that delivery service, not of your restaurant. You have no access to them. You just happen to make a transaction. So I like all of check all the boxes. Any last thought? Anything else that you had a big takeaway from this?
I never thought about the pens. Now I'm kind of grossed out by it because I never actually thought about it before he just said it. And I was like, oh, everyone is touching that pen.
Thanks a lot, Raj. Now Sophie's got a tick about pens, but totally right. It's so funny. We all have turned into like Tony Shalhoub on Monk, the TV show where he was he was like freaked out and would hand sanitize, spray everything, wouldn't touch people.
He's right.
Now we're all like that, It's just awareness. Like, look, coming out of this, the thing is, wash your fucking hands. Like, please wash your hands, wash your stuff. Restaurants, we think that we're super clean, and we are, and we have the technique in the background to really understand sanitation. And so I think we have the upside potential of being one of the better industries when it comes to reducing the risk. However, the pen and so many other interactions and touch points in restaurants, they're just not the best. They're not. They aren't. So I really appreciate this. All right, everybody. Great episode. Love this. I feel like I want to get more into some tech conversations. That felt really good. It felt really good too, because I'll talk to anybody about anything that has to do with hospitality and restaurants. And so, with Silicon Valley, it's like, oh, great. Is this going to be a conversation where they're like, restaurants suck, but if they do what we do, they're going to be better off? No, Raj came from a very he's one of us. He had to serve tables and get the side eye glance. I think I'll point that out again. I think the endurance that it takes and to be able to sustain that and be able to handle that clearly has shown that this guy is here to get shit done, just like people in restaurants. I appreciate you all. Cheers.